how much are you willing to do when it comes to the next thing, achieving that next thing, working to accomplish that goal, a goal you may have had for a long while, but maybe you started it, stopped, didn't really believe you could do it. So, what is your one thing that you said you were going to work on, but you never really finished it? That's what I'm going to talk about. This is Friday Night Live with me, Lady Lexi, and I'm talking this week about courage, about challenges, and Chicago. So, what do they have in common? Well, Chicago, first of all, is a city which is very inspirational. I've been there twice now, and the goal is to go there again next month. And well, traveling to the city through the city, well, not so much for me, but for others, can be very challenging. As in, there are so many stories about how to be very careful in Chicago. And of course, it also depends on where you are in the city and which lines you are taking and which you are not taking, and especially at what time. But well, I come from a big city myself. I've encountered a few things. So I'm not worried that easily. I mean, the things that I was afraid of might happen. Almost happened when I was early 20s. So, ever since I've got eyes in the back of my head. But no, I'm not that easily impressed anymore. There are too many people here walking around in the city, also different cultures. Not everyone always that kind and especially respectful. So yeah, I believe that I'm pretty much, well, let's put it this way. I know what to watch out for, and I know when to believe people and when not. It's I don't know how to tell you, but you can actually see it when people are lying to you, or they are pretending to be, and in the meanwhile it's, or their ears are shut. It happens, and fortunately, there are also a lot of people with big smiles, and especially when it comes to the older people, but also the ones walking their dogs late at night. You know, it's it's nice to give a smile and get a smile in return. Now, to switch from my city, which is called The Hague, and by the way, let me share a little thing. There's someone who thought The Hague was purely Hague. Well, that's not entirely true, because the original name in Dutch is Schravenhagen, and the comma S means des, and des means from. So it's from the graves, not the graves, the oh, that's so funny. I'm trying to literally translate um, the countess or the earls. That's what The Hague was from. So the Hague is literally, the whole green bunch of bushes and all that stuff. Protecting the gardens, and but it was from, I think it was from the counts. I'm not sure if it's counts or the earls. I don't even know which one has which status. I never really thought about it. But um, so when people only say Hague, that doesn't make sense. Now, I do have to say that from Des Gravenhagen, we changed it to Den Haag, so from The Hague, and that's The Hague in English. So I can understand why people actually say so. So it was kind of funny when I was speaking to someone who said, "Yeah, I know The Hague from the courts." And that's true. When it comes to international court, that's actually in The Hague. So yeah, makes sense. Now, continuing on, it's also about Chicago. And the difference for me between The Hague and Chicago is the Chicagoans themselves. So what I've seen is all walks of life are talking to one another, and they are especially very kind. And of course, there are exceptions, especially the ones you need to be, have an attitude because they're still young. But then again, when it comes to young people, you also see the ones who are, how do they call it? I keep, I'm close to the name, but I want to say cross dressing, but that's not it. It's when you actually are wearing like a wig and makeup and specific clothing um, that you create. It's called a little bit differently, but I'll get there later on. When I have to answer something on the spot and come up with something, it's like bloof, it's gone. So it's the way it is. But and I know it's on the tip of the tongue, and I just can't get there. But I'll get there. I'll get there later on. And probably some of you already watching this are like, oh, but this is what she means. Cosplay. That's it. Cosplay. Cross and cos. Yeah. Okay. Cosplay. So actually, I've had some amazing conversations on the L train, especially when I was alone. And because I usually wear my braces when I'm in Chicago because of the longer distances. So over here, I can use the car or I can go by bike. And I don't plan on doing a lot of walking. And if I have to use public transportation, I will be using my braces too. So the downside from public transportation is it's, the pulling up and then the braking. That's, the whole stability is gone in a second. And it can actually hurt my knees or probably my back really badly. So I'm always careful not to take it. But in Chicago, I do take the L train and sometimes Uber. It depends. Little known fact is that over here in The Hague, we don't have an Uber. And why is that the case? Because we have public transportation, which is too good. And also, there are a number of main roads for the cars. And then there are a lot of bike trails in, let's say, the suburb is not the correct word, but if you want to go in the areas where the houses are and you want to go from one part to the next part, then usually you will find a bicycle trail consisting of tiles, by the way, and sometimes pavement. So yeah, there are also a lot of obstacles to slow things down. So Uber drivers, they don't like coming to The Hague. So whenever I'm in the US, I know how to find Uber. One of the reasons is also that I, in the US, of course, I can rent a car and I can use, which makes sense if I'm going to go follow, a certain route or whatever. But usually I stay in the city and then I'll take a plane and go to the next city and then take a plane, go to the next state, That's more the way I do things. So, and then when I have training, it's usually in those fancy hotels, which is kind of nice when you're there, when you're having training. But if you get there by car, then first of all, either the parking lot is already full, but besides that, you can pay a lot of money. And whenever you're not at the fancy hotels and you are going somewhere, then I already heard, be careful because they're going to break into the car. So, well, someone has come to listen in. So that's cool. I always love it when people listen in. So this is actually on StreamYard. So it's behind the scenes. That's like a special perk. So, and there's actually a comment and it says good morning. So hello, good morning. And that's the funny thing when I'm doing my Friday Night Live, at this time it's evening in a lot of locations. Some it's actually prior to midnight, other places it's after midnight, and in some places it's actually already morning and it's light outside. Can you imagine that much? I think it's kind of cool, actually, though. And well, I usually, my goal is always to do these Friday Night Lives a few hours after midnight my time. But when I'm too tired, I tend to sleep a little bit. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to go do it. So before it actually, the sun starts to rise and daylight starts, I'm like, I need to get out there and get this done. So here I am. And now, of course, I talked about The Hague. The difference was Chicago, difference was the people, and also the way the city looks. There's such a difference. I mean, you can walk in one street and it's like really posh, and then the next one it's like, oh, what's happening here? So, and I know what the reason is. I've talked to a lot of people in Chicago, and like I said, it's whether it is because I'm wearing my braces and sometimes I'm on my own and people start talking to me. And a lot of people start talking to me because of the braces. So when I'm talking about the braces, I'm talking about my knee braces. And well, one basically has the stars and stripes on there. I like my stars. I like red, white, and blue. By the way, those are the colors of our flag too. Literally red, white, and blue. Yeah, in that order. And so one has stars on there, the stars and the stripes, and the other one actually has the pinup up there, which you also see right now. So there's an old pinup, which is at the bottom, and there's a new pinup, which is at the top. And people just love it, and they're not sure what it is. Like, is that for sports? Is that, because you want to look pretty? And then there are some who think, oh, this has a purpose. You probably need it. So, and a lot of people who actually need it, they ask me, like, excuse me, can I ask you something? And then, well, where did you get those? So a lot of people, I told them which brand it is, and well, we get them through our health insurance company. So the usually the hospitals prescribe it, and they don't just do it. So it has to be um, for long-term mobility issues. And then after that, the family doctor, the GP, can prescribe it again. So I actually have a new set made, which is exactly the same as the old one. But I was like, okay, it works for me. Left is different from right, so I know which one is which. It will only just fit a lot better. So that's good. Now, having talked about it and continuing on about challenge and courage. So whenever I'm in Chicago, I automatically walk more because I also sit a lot over there, for instance, in the L train, or, whenever there are like stores or coffee shops, Starbucks, where you can sit down, for a moment, I'll take that time to actually sit down. I'm not used to standing for a long time, although I'm standing longer and longer nowadays. But from not being able to walk and stand on 2 feet, I'm still used to actually leaning against the wall. So, and quite honestly, I've done so since I was a little kid. And as far as I can remember, my feet always used to hurt when I was walking long distances. So, I've never been good at it. But we are a bicycle country, as you might know. So, yes, I love my bicycle. Have I stopped using my bicycle? Yes, when I got my driver's license. So, there's a big difference between the US and the Netherlands. So, over here, we get to drive the car as early as 18 years old. And with driving, I mean, we take lessons. So nowadays, when you're 17 years old, you can already get your theoretic license, but not the driver's license as in the practical version. And well, it's not like you can sit next to your friends or your parents or whatever from 16 years old. No, again, you have to be 18 years old at least. And well, you have to actually get lessons in order to drive the car. And today, and this is a true story, I was sitting somewhere. I reached out to a friend. So my physical therapist is close to the friend I usually see like every week, and who's helping me taking a look at what I'm getting out there. And so I'm sort of using her to brainstorm with her, like, oh, what do you think that's out there, and showing it. So she keeps me sort of accountable, and that's the other way around too. So the really important things, we talk to one another about those kind of things, whether it's things related to her kids in school or things going on around the house, whatever it is, health, work. It's kind of nice actually to be able to do so. And yes, we also talk about Pokemon, and with her and the kids, I do walk outside when it comes to Pokemon. So that's good. So we also share another mutual hobby, which is Lego. That's me and the kids. Well, actually, their mom too. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, we were sitting on the bench because it's not really a restaurant. It's only open till 5. It closed, and so we wanted to sit somewhere before she had to head home again. And there was this person on the phone directing the car behind us, and I was looking at it and I was like, well, this person doesn't know what he's or she's doing. And every now and then I have that same thing when there's a lot of traffic and I'm tired and there are a lot of people behind me. It's like, okay, I need to park the car, and we have only a limited amount of space, right? So that means that our parking spots are not that big. Anyway, you could see that he didn't know how to park the car. So at some point, I looked at the lady who was, talking in the phone. And then I knocked on the window and said, let me help you out. So I helped him out, told him what to do, gave him the little tricks, like how can you know that you can actually. So we're talking about, I don't think it's called parallel parking. We call it traffic jam parking. So there's one car, here's the curb, and then you go and you park the car behind it. So usually that's in between two cars. And so I helped him direct like what he needed to do, like steering this side, now the other side, slow down, And then he was, he parked his car so nicely next to the curb. Well done, guy. Well done. Well, anyway, it was the third time that he was driving in this car. You call it pocket parking. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's literally like pockets, but over here it's small pockets. So it depends, of course, if a small car has been in there or a big car, depending on that, it's easier or not. So I gave him some pointers, and I said, it's a question of doing it. If you do it often enough, it's going to be a walk in the park. And he said, I don't like this. And it was like, yeah, I get that. I had that same thought like 30 years ago, 30 something years ago. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Um, I learned different styles of parking that I hadn't learned at all at when I was getting my driver's license. Anyway, um, I always applaud those people who come from the US and actually drive over here. So I've got a number of friends, musicians, and some of them, they get the van and then they drive through Europe, including in the UK, which is on the other side of the road. We'll talk about courage and talk about challenges. There is no way I'm going to drive in the UK myself because I still get confused when it comes to the opposite direction. Um, I have been contemplating doing it in Australia when I was there for a number of weeks. By the time you see it, you're getting used to it. And a long time ago, I did drive in the US, but nowadays it's really not necessary. So many things have changed, like for instance those Ubers. And especially when we talk about Chicago, there are buses, there are L trains. I'm not going to say that you want to go everywhere, especially when it comes to the buses and the suburbs. It's like 5 stops with one bus is like 30 with another one. So yeah, you can wonder what you want to do or not. But again, I love seeing what's going on, and I love talking to the people, especially on the L train. Lots of nice people. And again, I don't know what it is. Of course, I've seen my share of things, when it was later at night, someone would come in, sit down, and then he would look at me like, "Do you need something?" And I was like, "No." And then someone would come in at the stop, look at the guy, then, stand with their backs to the guy, handing him some money behind their back, getting something shoved in their hand, and then quickly getting out of the L train again. It's kind of funny if you think about it, because everyone can see what they're doing. And what I noticed back then, and that made quite an impression on me, is you actually see policemen with canines, with the dogs, actually going scouring on the platforms, in the L trains, out of the L trains. So, the last time I actually saw the same thing was in Paris. And I have to say, in Paris, I didn't feel that safe, especially not on my own. I had people walking along with me who wanted stuff, who tried to get into the hotel. People were no good for anything. You can see it, they check out the bikes, are they locked or not, those kind of things. So, and talking to the staff at the hotel, they confirmed it. And what was kind of unusual for me is normally if it's a short distance, I will walk somewhere. I cannot always do it. So whenever I can do it, it's good exercise actually for me, because I don't exercise the way I used to before I tripped on the brick like 10 years ago. But yes, I love Chicago. And because of it, I came up with 2 acronyms. One was related to the city. If you want to check it out, go to ladylexi.com/blog. So then you'll see my blog post. And well, if you actually sign up for the Chicago Courage Challenge, then you also will receive an email which actually gets into the various blog posts which I posted and wrote about Chicago. So the other acronym is related to the challenge, which stands for literally courage, higher level, um, inspiration or incentive, communication, accountability, groundwork, doing things, really doing the work, and overview. Now, if you put those words underneath one another, you get the acronym Chicago. And why? Well, first of all, I'm all about speaking up and speaking out. And when I coach people, I always talk about taking that next step. And, you know, when we're talking about taking the next step, or at least one step at a time, that's what I say, one step at a time. It can be small steps and it can be huge steps. So when I started this challenge, when I knew I was going to do it, it started with small steps. I would open up my iPad and I was like, yeah, yeah, I need to look at my website. I need to look at Kajabi. What can I do? And the first thing that struck me was I could see all the various challenges that I'd done and how I had done the opt-in pages and all. And I was like, nah, 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 no. So I actually cleaned up a bunch of things because I was like, that's not going to work. I want, something good, solid out there. And, with all the training that I'm teaching nowadays, so every week I have group coaching training. And well, officially it's like twice a month, but unofficially I do it every week. Because I just like it too much. So it's a good way to actually come up with training, doing things on the spot, coaching people in the hot seat, doing interviews, and mostly listening into, hey, what are the people doing? What what do they need when it comes to a boost? And then listening to people, I'll just come up with a topic and talk about it. And other times I use these forms from Brendon Burchard, like these ones. So these are from the Certified High Performance Coaching Training. So certified by, yes, Brendon Burchard. So he has developed this training. He has done a lot of research. And well, when you actually sign up and go through the entire training, you can call yourself a certified high performance coach. You actually get a certificate, and then every year you get recertified. And I have to say, I'm happy. And I've, a year after I did it and I did the recertification, I was like, okay, now I'm going to use it. And the first time I was coaching, I was like, okay, so apparently I need to look at you. And at the same time, I'm reading what's on the piece of paper, and that feels really weird. And then I figured out, well, it's not that weird. People don't see it as odd or anything. And well, I started using it also in the group coaching training. And I remember that the first time I started doing it, and actually prior to it, I was like, but how am I going to combine this with my own coaching? And then, at some point, like I said, I'm all about speaking up with clarity, communicating with clarity, so people understand one another, because I've experienced what it's like to actually say something to someone and they don't pick up on what it is you want to get across. And quite honestly, I had the same experience this week, as in yesterday. I went to the heart clinic. So they had me do this test on the bike. And I do high intensity training when I do my training. So high intensity training is basically, yes, you do have your startup, so that's not too much. And then at some point you go like, you push your heart rate like really up, and then you cool down for a second. So sometimes it's like training your muscles and then you do cardio, training your muscles and then you do cardio. So it's a very efficient way of training. And from the get-go, when they started giving high intensity training, I was like, oh yeah, that's my kind of training. So when I used to work out a lot, I would also do, for instance, legs, then arms, legs, arms. So instead of taking a break, I would just use a different muscle group. Now, when I got there, she said, no, you're not going to stand on the bike. You're just going to sit. Well, actually, I was allowed to stretch my legs And later, actually, that was the whole goal, that I needed to do so for accurate results. And it was so slow, the whole building up. But, normally you take a break for a few seconds and you go like really quick, really light. And then there's, you go and it's a little heavier. And they didn't do that. So I was like, at some point, those legs were so heavy. But the whole goal, which was getting my heart rate up, that didn't happen because my legs and the muscles, they had to work harder than everything else did. So, well, that wasn't good. So I wasn't too happy. And I was like, okay, well, I need to get back in 3 months anyway. And I'll see what happens. Now, the good news is, doing so, I realized that because my heart rate didn't go over the top as it used to, like still last year, I was like, okay, well, maybe things have improved. So I'm like, okay, I want to do more stuff. Like, for instance, the boxing at the physical therapist. So who knows? I finally can start to improve things. So I don't know if you know, but a couple of weeks ago, I went to the beach. That's about 7 miles. And the first time around went pretty nicely. I got there. Yes, I was out of breath, which is normal for me. And then I think we walked a little bit. And then a few days later, I walked there with my brother. So we actually went by car. And that, those were the first times that I actually did so without crutches. There's a video on Instagram if you're curious. And then I went cycling there again with one friend. We only like 10 or 11 days apart. And when it's summertime, we usually meet up. So depending on when the weather is actually good, that's when we meet up. And then, we usually halfway, when our routes, they merge, that's when we see one another. At least we do cycle along one another on the way back. On the way towards the beach, it's usually a little bit different because I'm always a little bit later than she is. So, but anyway, the last time didn't end up so well. So I've been dealing with my legs needing to recover for weeks. And it's finally getting better now after 3 weeks. But I talked to the physical therapist today and she said, well, you know what? When you do cycle to the beach, you take your crutches with you, and then you need to use your crutches in order to recover. And I was like, okay. But, well, that's the way it is. It's we can't have it all. And the crutches help me actually to take a lot of the weight off. And so that makes it easier. That's simply the way it is. Now, getting back to the whole Chicago Courage Challenge, the whole challenge was a challenge for me. It's still, I'm halfway. And some who actually did succeed in signing up, and I don't mean signing up for the newsletters, but actually signing up for the course so they could actually see what was going on in the modules. They know that I'm a little bit slow with things. So because this is new, it's I take it as it goes. But because of all the hospital visits and other stuff, I actually had surgery. Well, wasn't surgery. They didn't cut. They just did research. But I was under completely. So, yeah, that took its toll. But then again, working on it, and I like to sit at Starbucks, preferably outside, depending on the weather. But it's or at another restaurant for that matter. But Starbucks is nice. You have your coffee, Um, I open up my iPad and then I go do my magic on there, and I search for things and I sort things out and then I write things. But the writing usually goes pretty smoothly when I'm there. It's like an instant momentum when I'm there. And well, one of the emails was about Chicago. And then I was like, okay, what did I write about it? Oh, yeah, the first acronym, the second acronym. Then about when I was in Chicago, the Clarity Challenge. I've done 2 Clarity Challenges whenever I returned from Chicago. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's actually kind of cool. And I've got so many short videos still and so many pictures I can post. And actually, I also have a bunch of shirts. So I initially was like, okay, every day that I'm going live, I'm going to wear a different Chicago shirt. But I think I only wore one shirt in the entire time. But, whenever I go places, especially in the US, and I'm wearing this Chicago shirt, and people reach out to me, oh, are you from Chicago? And then they usually tell me, oh, I've lived there and then I moved away. And well, but people from Chicago, they love Chicago. It's as simple as that. So we all have this common love for the city. Now, getting back to the whole challenge part, for me, remember that I talked about the age, taking things to a higher level. So this whole year, and not just this whole year, bunch of years, but especially the last year, since I came back from the coaching summit with Brendon Burchard and seeing a lot of people in Ultra. So Ultra, that's, basically for the small business owners or the managers or the big business owners who need that boost and want to talk with like-minded people, who are like, we are going to go for it. And well, first of all, it's always funny because people see my name, whether it's on the name tag or that they actually recognize my face, from Zoom. And then, hey, Lady Lexi. And I'm like, who are you? So, but nowadays I'm getting to recognize certain people, so that's kind of nice. And well, ever since I was there last year, things changed. Things just changed. It was like there was a new drive to go do things, because that's the vibe which is over there. And of course, you can do a lot of things when you're actually not having to do other stuff and when you're in different surroundings. And that's one of the reasons that I'm organizing the Chicago trip, because I believe that, first of all, I believe that coaching is more effective when you take someone out of their normal environment, so they don't have their normal obligations, but instead they can really focus on working on that one thing. And when you can actually see people, although I can also do that online, it's about when you go really in depth with people, then you can really figure out what's their mindset and what's keeping them from moving forward. Then again, like I said, I can do that on the phone too. I can do that on Zoom too. But it's nice when you actually get to meet people in person and you can take them to a certain location and then talk on. And of course, depending on what you see, depending on where people are, people will react in a certain way. So it gives me a pretty good idea, like, hey, this is something they're really good at, and this is something they could use a little push and a little bit of extra courage to go do whatever it is that they need to do. So having experienced those things, traveling through the US, but also other places, I'm like, yeah, it's when you're not in your normal environment, when things usually can be taken up a notch. So basically to the next level. The, the challenge, yeah, we're talking about challenge a lot, is when you get back to your usual place, what do you do? Do you get back in the rhythm of the everyday life? And do you have time left to actually work on that one thing that you got out there to do? And quite often, people don't have the time. They reserve the time for going somewhere or setting up a Zoom when there's a specific kind of event. And when you go to a city for multiple days, of course, then you're really like in that vibe. And during lunch and during dinner, when you meet up with other people, you also talk about it. So that's what I really like about it. So ever since I went to one of those events, and it was back then it was called Expert Academy, I was like, oh yeah, what's that one thing that I want to get out there? Well, I want to take people on a trip. And at first it was like, I'm going to show them around Europe during Christmas. And last year it was like, okay, I need to do it before Christmas. And of course we had COVID in between. But it's, you know, I'm getting a better picture with every passing year. So that's good. And this year, when I got those emails out there and I was looking at what I posted last year and what I'm doing right now, so I basically, um, I never did an actual sequence of emails like 10 days in a row. It was just not my thing. But doing it now, and even though I'm late with some, so then I resend them. And the good news is, by the time that people sign up now, then I'll be in time. So it's, yeah, it's surprising what they come up with in the system, and then what I come up with based on, just a few words or sentences that they write down. And I'm like, oh, actually, I can talk about this. Oh, I can talk about that. So prior to the challenge, before I actually saw those email sequences, I was already like, okay, yeah, I do have some meditations. I've got my worksheets, especially one going from negative to positive. We're talking about beliefs and how to turn them around. And, of course, I had acronyms. I was like, well, I can probably record some training on the spot. And then all of a sudden, I started doing totally different things. For one, people had problems signing up in Kajabi because there's not always a button. Quite often you just have to click on the picture. But, well, a lot of people there are like, where's the button? So I had to redo it and make it like it had a button. So I finally got to understand the sections with, oh, this is text, this is picture, this is video, offer. Oh, that's what I mean with offer. And then, of course, the offer looked different because I used some pages, and those pages seemed to be linked to the offer, but they weren't. But now I'm sort of getting it, and I'm like, oh, I need to teach some other people too about this. But one of the things that stood out, because other students, let's call them students nowadays, picked up on the whole thing. They were like, yeah, I want to do the challenge too. And they actually started doing the challenge. And the question, of course, was, how can I start with something? And that's a question I often get, without spending too much money. So I recorded a little something about social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, how you can actually link together by using StreamYard, what I'm using too. By the way, if you're interested, I do have a sign up link. I'll just need to make sure that I actually include it in the description. And of course, StreamYard has its advantages because you don't need at least 1,000 subscribers, either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, to go live. So that's nice, those are workarounds. And so before I knew it, I was sharing my screen, doing things, then editing it. So, it would make sense. And I was like, oh, okay, this is taking things to a new level, different level. And of course, I said I was also going to approach some people, which I did, but I didn't post everything in the big group. Well, I actually did on one platform, and then it was Crickets. And the other platform, I haven't done it yet. But, well, that's what I'm going to do too, because I do believe that when it comes to promotion and marketing, it works way better when you actually have other people who are good at those kind of things to help you out. So I had to learn how to create an affiliate link, all those kind of things. And it was like, of course, I've known for years about affiliates, just like I've heard about all the email sequences and all that stuff. But between hearing about it and then actually writing them and getting them out there, well, thank heavens for AI, and also for people who actually have written a template. So they ask you questions, write this and that, or make sure that you get this across. And then it's like, okay, so what do I want to get across? Okay. And then I start writing, and then flow, momentum, right? So that makes things a lot easier. But of course, I do need to have the time, and I need to have the energy. And I can tell you that when you have been under anesthesia, I think that's the right word, it takes its toll on you. So the next day I had a splitting headache. My stomach was a little bit, and then the next day I still noticed I was still tired. And because I had to get up for what for me was early, I didn't make my full cycle of sleep. But what happens then is during the evening, at some point I fall asleep. And instead of this being the beginning of the next cycle, it's sort of like catching up with the previous cycle. And then I usually go live. I get out there, talk about things. Then I'm sort of awake. And by the time I go to sleep and go into the next cycle, I hardly ever get my 8 hours. Unless, of course, I don't have to do anything that next day. And then we're good to go. But this week was a busy week with the whole challenge, with the hospitals, with clients, with students, also appearing on their lives. So, busy. But good. I have to say that if I compare how I started this week and how I'm finishing this, especially if we take from last Friday Night Live to now, I've gained so much confidence. So much has changed. And we're talking about 1 week, right? And if there's one message I want to get across today, it's when you start doing one step at a time, then at some point it's like you're getting into routine, and then curiosity hits. And instead of like, oh my God, I don't know how this works, the opposite starts to happen, especially when you do it more often. So that's why I say, people, sign up for the challenge. You can get it for free while I'm still going out there live. So that's till next Monday or till Tuesday, depending on how you look at it. And then after it, if you want lifetime access, then you have to pay for it. And, if you do it during the time that I still go live, you get a discount. And of course, if you are to go on the Chicago trip, then you get the training too. But here's the thing. The acronym is about doing a certain thing and taking it to the next level. But you can repeat it over and over and over and over again. Because that's the only way, by doing it over and over and over and over again, tweaking and changing, adding things, that you actually get to improve things. And just, this today I was listening to one of Brendan Burchard's Daily Fire. So he's got this growth day. I can put a link in there too if you're curious. And so he talks about things to get you moving on, to get you going. And one of the things that he said, and I've heard him say it more often because I follow quite a bit of training from Brendan for years now, is if you say I've done it all, then show the spreadsheet. And okay, so show me what you've done. And today I was thinking about it and I was like, yeah, that's what I was doing last week. Or this week, actually, I could actually see, oh, this is what I've done, this is what I've done. And I could actually, in whether it was in the emails or elsewhere, I can actually put in the links to former blog posts or, to other things that I already have. And that felt good. It still feels good to be quite honest, because it's like, hey, I can now see that I've been building towards where I am. And I'm not there yet. I'm in the process of improving things. So I've got a lot of work still to do. But, especially when I've done the live recordings, there is some editing involved. And then, of course, it needs to be uploaded to YouTube, for instance. And, by the time I'm like, oh, now I want to sleep. So during the day, I usually do the writing, and then during the evening or the night, then I'll go live and I'll do the recording. And then early morning, it's like, bye people, I'm going to sleep. So at the heart clinic, they were like, can't you change that routine? And how come that you're working at night? And I said, well, first of all, I used to work with multiple shifts. So sometimes was day, sometimes evening, sometimes night. I said, well, once you start doing that, your biorhythm, it goes haywire. But I'm also one of those people who work best when it's quiet. And so, for instance, I came back from the physical therapist. I met up with that friend who lives close by. And then I came here and they were having a party behind me. So they were testing the new sound system. It was so loud that actually the vibrations were palpable. Not that I felt them, but I could literally hear everything in my cupboards going, resonating with the music. And I was like, well, that's a little bit too much, especially since I have some phases above the cupboards, because you never know, especially when I actually got people here for when I did stuff locally as a therapist. People would bring, flowers every now and then and other stuff. So I've got some faces on there, and I was like, well, I don't want those faces to, oh, there we go. And they've fallen. So I actually said something about him. So about it. So by the time I left here to go play drums, I was like, okay, well, I'll see how much noise there is when I return. And then by the time it was quiet. But then we're talking about, after midnight. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to go straight for the live? And I was like, no, I want to write something down, because I do want to talk about a certain topic, and I want to get something across about about it, what I've done, but also which is all related to that one topic. And in this case, it's about courage, it's about challenges, about taking things to the next level if you just keep doing it over and over and over again. And of course, about Chicago, because, well, this is, for me, is the Chicago month. Actually, they started recording Chicago PD again, and I'm like, oh, I want to be there. And the next month, they're going to have their premiere over there. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool to be there. I was there 2 years ago. So, um, and you know, when you actually watch the series, and I know that the people who live in Chicago usually are like, what are you talking about? Unless, of course, you are living in the neighborhood where they actually park the trucks and and more trucks and even more trucks because they're going to record. But otherwise, a lot of people in the US, they don't know about Chicago PD. So that's kind of funny. My friends in Florida, however, they do know it, and it was kind of nice to actually watch TV with them and watch all those series. So it's one of the fun things, or one of the perks when you go to the US. You actually get to see a lot of series I like, which are delayed over here. But apart from that, yeah, the whole message that I want to get across with the whole challenge is, if you take one step at a time, you are going to take things to a higher level, but are you willing to do the work? That's, of course, the question. And are you willing to really participate in the challenge? Or is it just you sign up and then it stops? So I've noticed that because it didn't go quite well in the beginning, was the whole signing up. People did sign up. I saw their email addresses, but in order to access the modules, or actually access the course, they needed to do an extra step. Now, luckily for me, one of the people reached out, and I'm going to say thank you. You know who you are. And so I could change it. But what surprised me was that even with sending emails, no one bothered to actually, go through the process again and actually sign up. It was like, okay, so if the first time around it doesn't work, then people just give up, which is true nowadays. I mean, look at Instagram. It's like, you just swipe and you go and you go and you go. So that's why we need shorts nowadays, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And I do my lives every now and then on Instagram, sometimes because it's simply easier. Sometimes because I know there are people watching. So, then I get comments. It's always different when I do it like this in StreamYard, because usually there are not that many people who are actually watching it on YouTube at that moment, unless I told them to, hey, come here, come backstage, or go watch it on YouTube. So I stopped airing it to Instagram most of the time, not always, but Friday Night Live is basically to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and to YouTube. So, and then it's a whole different ball game. So every platform has its advantages. And well, I started recording these things for the challenge this week. And, I didn't expect it, but I was like, okay, well, if people need to know how they're going to do a challenge and they want to start from scratch, then they need those videos. So that's why I recorded them. And well, I do believe that they can be really useful for other people too. And I'm planning on doing more with this stuff. If I'm going to explain it to people anyway, then I might as well teach it to others, right? And it's the most time is actually in the recording itself, and then the editing afterwards. And then, like I said, if people want it, they can get it. And especially when you sign up for the challenge, then you can get it. So, having talked about this, the challenge, especially when, and yeah, I'm making a big leap now to also the Chicago trip. When I was thinking about my story, I'm all about speaking up, speaking out, right, and sharing your story. So it's about learning to communicate with clarity. And I talked with one of my clients about it this week extensively. And I said, yeah, I know that you only want to share things once. And then you're like, why should I repeat it? I said, but people don't always pick up on it. So you really need to repeat yourself, do it in a different way, and, be patient instead of exploding at some point because they didn't get you. That doesn't get you anywhere. So, and so the other part, and some of you might know this by now, is my heart is at companies where there's difficulty when it comes to communication, as in what can be done, what cannot be done, what is expected from you, what can you deliver, what can you not deliver, and how do people challenge you, and what can you do in order to grow. So many things have changed, over the last decades. I saw it change when I was working for the various companies. But one thing that struck me, and I know that's still true, especially with everything that people need to do, is people are not specific when it comes to assignments, and also not to communicating. And nowadays we know more about people who are neurodivergent. So those are people who think a little differently, absorb information very differently, and hence when you ask them questions, they have a different expectation from that question when it comes to answers than most of the people have. So, and one of the reasons I talked about speaking up, speaking out, is because, when you don't get heard, you don't get taken seriously. And if that happens often enough, then you don't see a way out anymore. And I've helped a lot of, especially younger people here locally, who didn't see any perspective anymore. And so I want to change that part. But it also applies to businesses and how you are seen as an employee, how you are valued, how much is being said and shared with you. So when I go and I take people to Chicago, there's going to be a group, and that's going to be during the daytime, which is for everyone, which is going to be about personal development. And then there is going to be a group which is specifically for small business owners. But the cool thing about this challenge is this can be used both in your personal life, but also to improve things on a business level. So if you want to sign up for the challenge, which I've been talking about, and how it actually also challenged me this past week, go to ladylexi.com/CCCF. So Lady Lexi, that's me, .com/Chicago Courage Challenge for free, CCCF, and do it in capitals. For some reason, there's a difference between capitals and lowercase, and that's where a lot of things didn't go right when people were actually signing up. So for those who did sign up and never got access, please do it again. And if you haven't signed up yet, then please go do it. And if you want to know more about the Chicago coaching trip, long weekend in Chicago, then hit me up, send me a DM or something, and I'll get on a coaching call with you, to get a bit of an idea why you want to go there and how that's going to work out. And of course, if you go through all the modules, then yes, you can get a free coaching call too. So, well, that's my speech for today. When it comes to the challenge, I have to say I'm kind of proud of how it's developing. So it's still work in progress. And yeah, I do really believe that this can benefit people, especially those who are new when it comes to starting up things. And maybe they're good at one thing, but they're not so good at other things, getting the message out there. So if you want to work on that, then, hey, I'm here. So that's where to find me. For now, what did you get out of this life? What would you work on? Let me know. Leave comments. When people leave comments, that's also a way to get into certain topics the next time around. But if people don't share, then I don't know, so I can't get into it. But if you do share, I do get into it. So thank you for listening. Go to ladylexi.com, CCCF, and sign up.